Okay, guys, I'm here today with Giancarlo Bodoni. Huge honor for me. 2 times ADCC champion, the current ADCC champion, and Brian Glick, the first black belt from Danaher. And guys, in this video here today, we're gonna talk about how it is to be like a professional athlete, ADCC champion, and how is the training for that versus an older jiu-jitsu practitioner. First, Danaher's black belt. How old are you, Brian?
48.
48. So how do you train versus how do you train? And I'm also very curious to hear about you were talking about the flow training, Bodoni, so I'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah.
So,
I was just gonna say we train together. You know, I think that it's important. Like the first thing is like we train together all the time. So I think that sometimes when people first hear about this, it's like, people like think in terms of like ages and stages of grapplers. It's like, oh, you're either like hardcore, high intensity pro athlete at the highest level, like crushing it every single day, or you're like a skinny old guy who has to kind of like make do with like whatever you can get. And so when we train together, it's not like I think it's not Giancarlo's normal competition speed, like that kind of intense, like peaking for a camp type thing. But it's also not like taking it easy. So I think it's important, like it is 2 different styles, but also we do train together and it does work. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I think that, so if you look at exactly what Brian was saying is that most of my training, especially outside of competition, is catered around like technical development. And then when you look at how training varies between a professional athlete versus somebody who's more of a recreational practitioner, even if they train at the same frequency of a professional athlete, like Brian trains every single day, even though that's not like competing is not his job. And so whether you're a competitive athlete or you're training recreationally, not for competition, you can still develop a very high level technique and high level jiu-jitsu. I think the main differences are that when you're thinking about competition, I actually heard George St. Pierre said this, and he said that competitive athletes have to think about 3 things. It's technique and skill, as well as physical development, like your physicality. You have to be strong, you have to be in shape, and then the tactical element, right? Match strategy and things like that. So most of my training camps are centered around tactics and physical preparation, doing hard rounds, going into the weight room, et cetera, and match tactics that are specific for, an ADCC competition or EBI or whatever the case may be. And then year round, always training on technical development, right? So the technique comes first and the other stuff, you add on to it. And so, if I train with Brian, or if I train with, a lot of the guys that I train with in the training room are either smaller than me or maybe less skilled than me or whatever the case is. I can't train at extremely high intensity every single day or I'll just burn out and I'll break my body down. So 80% of the time, or depending on the time of year, more or less, but roughly 80% of the time my training is based around lower to moderate intensity training with people that we're not trying to kill each other. And so like Brian and I did a video on YouTube last year, I think, where we did essentially like a flow round, which is what we were talking about before, and basically show how you can still kind of mimic a lot of the things that happen in a high intensity role without having that the risk of injury and that high degree of tension, where you don't really get like you develop physical fitness, you develop match tactics, you develop mental toughness, and all those things are valid, but you sometimes, maybe if you train like that all the time, you don't develop like the sensitivity to be able to react to certain things and train late stage defenses and things like that. So I think that's a critical part of training, and there's various different training methodologies, but that's something that we implement all the time when we train with each other or when we're training with other people.
I think this is a great thing, because this gives the opportunity for the hobbyists to train with the professionals, because the hobbyist almost becomes part of your training, right? Because you need them in order to test the techniques and focus on the techniques. Right. If you only train with Gordon and the Nico's Marigai every single day, like you're not going to be able to.
Yeah, and even when we train with each other, like we still do train like that a lot of the time. Because I think it gives you a really good ability to like refine certain skill sets and kind of the way we put it is like kind of play different positions, right? So
Yeah.
give a little to get a little, and we kind of go into this back and forth. It's almost kind of this like agreed upon pace where I give him a couple moves, he gives me a couple moves, and we can kind of work on different things, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think you know what's nice about this approach is that it doesn't exclude like non-professional athletes. You know, like you can be training at any level and really any age or stage, and you can adopt this sort of thinking, and you can adjust your training to work this way, whereas it's not true the other way. You know, where after a certain point, I mean, you guys have both achieved, you know, you've been at the peak of, you know, jiu-jitsu competition, you know, multiple time world champion, multiple time ADCC champion, but everybody peaks, you know, in your career. And I think that there's kind of this longevity question too, because, you know, we're all going to keep training, you know, and I think it's like whether you are like early in your career or late in your career, like after a peak, like this is still a practice that you can do. And I think that it's, I think this thing also is, or this way of thinking about it, this approach, it allows for a study of nuance and subtlety, which is present at the very highest levels. Like we were working on gripping from passing, and I was saying, you know, like grip fighting is one of those things. It's a really subtle skill. If you try to learn good grip fighting at high intensity, competitive level pace in the room, you're never going to learn it. You know, you're always just going to kind of do what you do best, instead of adjusting for skill or improving technique. But if you can slow things down, or if you can work at a more moderate pace, lower intensity, then you do have a chance to develop these, you know, these subtler, more nuanced skills, which when you do turn things up and intensity is higher, they're accessible to you. So yeah, I think that it's a bit of a false kind of dichotomy that people make, you know, where they feel like you have to, either the professional athletes are going hard all the time, because a lot of times the clips that we see are like, you know, going hard, or, you know, high intensity, or, you know, you're seeing people prepping for a tournament, you're seeing people, and so like the image that people get is this, but actually it's never been the case. And I mean, even in the, you know, even Blue Basement time, it was surprised. I think a lot of people were surprised at the level of intensity, that it was much lower than what they expected, and that actually that has a positive impact on performance rather than a negative impact on performance.
No, that makes total sense. Yeah, I think especially like for those tournaments that's submission only, I think the technique becomes even more important versus like an IBJJF, where maybe tactical could be more important than the technique. So not more important, but the level of importance goes up. So like
well, and you get to learn from each other too. I think that it would be one thing if I trained with Giancarlo and everything that he did was based on strength and tactics and all these other things, there would be less for me to learn at this stage of training, because it's like there are certain things I can do, certain things I can't do, you know. But like in the last, you know, 3 or 4 years, my jiu-jitsu practice has changed a lot, in part because of training with Giancarlo and the guys down in Austin, because, you know, things like wrestling, wrestle-ups, like countering leg locks, like playing that whole thing was something that is like, as it was getting developed, I was able to participate and I was able to learn because of exactly what he's saying. We were able to like train at a pace where you can absorb, you can understand, you can grow, even if, you know, you're not you're not getting ready for a tournament.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And anything to add, Mr. Bodoni?
Yeah, I think that kind of like touching on what Brian said is, especially when you're looking to develop new skills, there's several different ways that you go about it. Like positional sparring is one good way, but even when you go and you start to narrow down the positions that you're training in, utilizing this kind of approach to your sparring, whether it be positional or open rounds, gives you a much greater ability to kind of feel positions, because when you're learning a move, you're thinking about it and you're kind of conscious. But when you're sparring with somebody, there's so many things happening at once that it's very difficult for you, when things are moving quickly, to actually make moment-to-moment decisions that are conscious. You can do it, but it becomes very, very difficult. So you almost kind of have to get into a state where you develop a sensitivity to feel what's happening, and you're kind of making these little subconscious decisions. And when you're looking to develop new skills, like he touched on the idea of hand fighting, that's a perfect example. When there's a high degree of tension, and then there's this idea where I don't want to lose in a round, it's very easy to develop tunnel vision, and it's like you want to make this move work and I don't want to make any of their moves work. Whereas when I play in the way that we're talking about doing, and I mean, we can move around a little bit and show you guys, but you kind of have to have this mindset of like acceptance, like letting things happen.
Yeah.
And the way that I actually recently had a class with my students that I had them focus on this exact training style specifically, and the way that I look at it is like, you have to kind of let your training partner do 3 or 4 moves, and then they let you do 3 or 4 moves. So there has to be a
give and take.
Exactly, yeah. You guys have to be in like a synergy. So, and those moves can be offensive, they can be defensive, right? So you guys go into a variety of different positions, especially if you're doing an open round, you go into a variety of different positions that you can't even count. Like, you'd have to go back and re-watch the entire tape to see how many positions you guys actually exchanged, which if, he and I decided, hey, we're just gonna spar and see who wins in a 10-minute match, you're gonna get significantly less positions, and you're not gonna be able to really work on as many skills. It's a good way to work on, again, like I told you, like, you're gonna get a tough round, you're gonna get better, you might have to be a little bit more tactically aware, but you're not going to get that. Like, if I wanted to work on hand fighting, we have to actually be in a position where he's willing to let me work on things, and I'm, and we go back and forth and we counter each other, and then I do stuff and then he does stuff. So we exchange a couple of moves at a time, then I ease up. Another thing too is, like, it's very easy to get caught in, when you're doing a round like this, the speed can start to pick up, and if you feel as though there's too much tension or too much resistance, just being consciously aware to kind of let go of that tension and just let things happen. You have to be in a state where you're just willing to accept things happening.
Can you show?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So one question, very quick, like, is there any sort of deal? How do you guys synchronize? Like, who is going? Is there any deal? Like, I'm gonna make 2 moves, he's gonna make 2 moves, I'm gonna do 3 moves, he's gonna do 3 moves, or it's just like common sense as you go?
I think you have to, like, we're used to training with each other, so I think that we kind of have, like, we kind of understand, what pace to play and like what to roll with each other. But I think a good starting point, like if you're not used to it, is like 3 or 4 moves kind of exchanging back and forth, right?
Yeah.
So maybe
Each person, like, I do 1, 2, 3, he does 1, 2, 3, I do 1, 2, 3, that kind of stuff.
For example, like let's say I started, he's on his knees and I'm in a butterfly. Like, let's say I come out and then I go in and I start looking to hit him with a sumigashi. I come up in the top position. He starts to just kind of react and allow me to play the position. Now he steps over, we go through, and we're kind of just flowing through the movements, right? I'm letting him gain position. He's letting me gain position. He's letting me get out, and we're working towards.
Yeah, and I think you build in pauses. Like, they're really subtle. Like, not that it's probably difficult to catch, like, on video.
Yeah.
But like, we're building in like these pauses where, like, I feel like the natural. You can kind of anticipate like what the natural thing is gonna be. So like, if you go like seated, like sumigashi again, So like Giancarlo goes Sumigashi here, right? So like when I come up here, like if he comes up super fast, then kind of that's a cue to me that like I'm playing bottom still.
Yeah.
But like he backed off a little bit, and then that gave me a second to get up.
Okay.
And then like I'll hang here instead of going like super hard to a finish and see what he's gonna do. And sometimes he'll give me a reaction, you know, like, yeah, this is good. And now from here, we're playing a different. So in a way, I feel like building in pauses, like for people who want to train more like this, I think if you can build in pauses that at early on are more obvious, so that the other guy has got a cue where he's like, oh, it's my turn, kind of.
Yeah.
You're almost speaking to each other through like feel, like you're physically talking to each other. So if I feel that he's applying a little bit more tension or a little bit more speed, again, you have to be just willing to let that happen.
Yeah.
Whereas if I feel him ease up on that, then he's telling me, hey, come go to your move.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you can see it closely like in submission. So like if we're working and like we end up here, like straight arm lock stuff, and like Giancarlo knows, you know, like obviously we're not going in to break the arm, but like, you know, we can get to a position like this. He's working his counters and stuff, and I'll kind of keep holding.
You go like
But-
40%.
Yeah, like,
50%.
you know, if he does get to an escape and totally gets out here, you know, I'll like, whatever. I'm not so committed to the lock that I'm not going to let him get out or work his way through. But if he doesn't get out, like let's just say you're training with someone and they're at a place where they are at the end of their technical limits. They just don't have an answer for it. Then, you know, I'll either choose to, you know, he'll either choose to let me out or I'll choose to let him out, or the other person will tap, and then you keep. But you do have to kind of have this exchange. And I
Good.
think, like, when you were talking about, like, being willing to let things happen, you know, like, one of the things I think Giancarlo is, like, it's one of his strongest suits, is leg lock counters and, like, responding to, like not only counter-attacking, but also, like, overcoming being put, like, using a leg lock as a pass. And when you're passing the guard, like, if you're learning how to pass the guard, like, you better know how to deal with being put in a leg lock.
Yeah.
If you play a game or you have a jiu-jitsu practice that's built around never getting put in leg locks when you're passing because you don't know how to deal with it and you don't like it, then it's going to be a very incomplete, like,
Yeah, no, I agree.
approach.
Yeah.
So the only way really to develop the confidence to do that is this sort of training where it's like the guy's putting you in a leg lock, you just have to deal with it.
And Bodoni is a perfect example because this was one of your weakness and now it's one of your strengths. Like at some point, leg lock was a weakness on your game.
Yeah.
And now it's one of strength. Like you almost like give you leg lock and you know, like so like.
Yeah, and I think that this style of training really helps you do that because again, like you learn to kind of understand the position more profoundly because you develop just a sensitivity to where you're at without having to overanalyze, right? So you just kind of know how to react, what direction to move, how quickly do I need to move, how much danger am I in, and then, you know, and again, this is just one aspect of training, right? It's kind of like the compounding effect of everything is what builds a skilled practitioner. But for that specifically, I think that's why this training is incredibly useful, right? It's just develop sensitivity, and like you can see that sometimes we might pick up the speed and the pace, okay, depending upon how familiar we are with each other, and you know, also, you know, skill level, and you know, like you said, what your technical limitations are. Like some people's ceiling is very high, some people's a little bit lower, so you're going to be able to exchange more moves. You're going to be able to increase the pace or decrease the pace depending on those things. And you can even get, like, if we did that for 10, 15, 20 minutes, like, you're going to increase your heart rate as well. So it's not like you're not training, quote unquote, hard. It's just that what you're actually refining, what you're actually improving is different.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
No, that was fascinating to watch, and I think especially as you age, this becomes even more usable, right? Because like
so.
You don't need to train crazy hard, and you can apply that.
Yeah,
even
I think
more.
so. I think that, you know, look, the reality is that, you know, if you're lucky enough to age in jiu-jitsu, you know, if you're lucky enough not to have been sidelined as a blue belt or a purple belt because, you know, of injury or, you know, some other thing, you have to make some adjustments.
I agree.
You know, I think it's nonsense to say like, you know, you can't fight aging, you know, forever. You can resist it a bit, but at some point, like, there are issues that I have now that I've had in the last 3 years that I don't have any, I mean, that I used to not have.
Yeah.
So you accommodate that stuff, but you can't, I think the biggest issue for older practitioners is an unwillingness to adjust to a sort of training that they may feel like is like an acknowledgement that they're getting older, but the reality is you are getting older.
I agree.
And if you want to keep training, you have to make adjustments. And I think to Giancarlo's point, like this is not like a lesser than way of approaching jiu-jitsu. It's actually the way that people who are at the highest level of the sport are training.
Yeah, I agree.
But as someone who's a bit older, sometimes you have to do more of that and like less of the other stuff if you want to be able to keep training.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, no, it's awesome to see like this synergy between like an older grappler who maybe trains as a hobby and a professional athlete, and there's a lot of things in common here.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will appreciate it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Bodoni.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And guys, make sure to check Giancarlo and Brian instructional videos at bjjfanatics.com. They're two of the best instructors you can find, and they have a lot of instructional videos at bjjfanatics.com. So check it out, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Please help me out to grow my YouTube channel. Just click subscribe. And to watch more videos, just click under see more videos. I hope you enjoyed.
BJJfanatics.com. Use the promo code YouTubeFaria to get 10% off any instructional video. Improve your jiu-jitsu faster.